someone like myself,
原子力発電所の人たちや、あるいは
the
政府など
nuclear
が
power plant
嘘を
camp
言っ
or the
て、
government,
それで住民を不安
so
に陥
they
れているとも
lie,
勝手に言ってしまうこともできると思います。
and I could say that they are lying and they are causing pain for the residents.
どうしても信頼を失ったことがストレスになって病
The
気に
fact
なっ
that
ていくっ
trust
て
has
言っ
been
てし
lost,
まうと、
if that
ま
causes
るで
stress and if that
その
causes illness,
被害者
if
であ
one
る
is to say
住
that,
民の人たちの方に
then
問題があるかのように
it
認
makes it
識されて
sound
しまうんです。
like the residents who are the victims are to blame.
でも私はやっぱり問題があるとしたら、
But if
住
there
民の
is a
方にある
problem
んでは
at
なく
all,
て、
then the
原子力
problem does
発
not
電
lie
所
with
な
the
どの
victims.
方に問
The
題があるんじゃな
problem
いかと。
rather is with the nuclear power plants. Yes, Dr. Tanaka?
今の議論を聞いていて、
And listening to the discussion,
菅さん先生がおっしゃったのと私も非常に同じようにとても不快な気持ちなんですけれど
so
も、
I actually felt very unpleased,
議論が途切れ
like
たということが見えたんですね。
Sebastian just said, but I just feel like
さまざまなところに散らばっていて、
the
一体これが何なのかと
discussion
私は
is
ち
not
ゃんと
not convergent.
同
I
級生を
think
通じて関わりはあっても
I try to
関わってい
understand
る
what
というところ
the
で、
issue is.
こう
I
いう
have
ところで私
former
自身が認
schoolmates
識
who
し
are
ているの
in
で、さらに
Fukushima,
こ
but
の会場の
I'm from
相当
Fukuoka,
遠い
so
外
very
に
far
いるという
away,
ふうに
and
私
that's
は
where I
思うん
have
で
my
すけれど
practice. So
も、
I think that I'm
午前
very
中に
removed from the issue.
そし
But
て
this morning,
川上先生が発表された部分で、
Reverend Kawakami
困っている
gave
市
a
をいろい
presentation,
ろこういろんな部
and
分
he
から
talked
対立
about
という点があっ
the
たと思うんですけ
troubled
れども、
laymen
その第三の
and
対
how
立
there
が
are
私
different
はこの部分
camps.
で出ましたと中で、
And he
やっぱり
talked
悩ん
about
でいる
a
部分
third
だという
category of
ふうに思う
academics
ので、そ
who
の
are
グループの中
anti-nuclear.
での対立というか、
And
何かこう
within the group,
皆
there
さん
seems
お
to
そら
be
く原発の被害
a
に遭った人たち
dispute.
をどうにかして助けたいという
I'm
気持
sure
ちを
that
皆さん共通に
all
持っ
of
ていら
you
っしゃる
have
はずな
the
のに、
shared goal
ど
of
こかで
wanting
こ
to
う
help
議論の
the
途中
nuclear
というとこ
accident
ろが
victims.
微妙に
But
こう噛み合
my
わない状
feeling
況にな
is
ってしまっ
that the
ている
point in the
ような状
discussions
況を私は今見て
seems to be
ます。
slightly
そ
off.
れがどういうことと近いかというと、
And
先
what
ほど
that
川崎さん
seems
おっ
to
しゃってい
me,
たのと非常に近いんです
this
けれ
is
ど
maybe
も、
close to
お
what
そらく
Kawasaki-san
行政
said.
が意図的に住民の人たちを苦しめよ
The
うとして
government,
最悪の決断をしたというふうにはあまり思えなくて、 そ
it
の
doesn't
形
seem to me
の
like they
ま
made
ま
the
の出
worst
来事
decision
たちをし
possible
たという
to
こと
try
で、
to inflict
非常に
pain on the
驚いてい
residents.
ると思い
I'm
ま
sure
す。
that they were
ところがそ
traumatized,
の
and
状
I'm
況
sure
が
that
起きて
it
いると
was
いうことを
they were
謝
rendered
罪することができないの
dysfunctional.
かというこ
But
と
to
も、
apologize for the fact or to even
考え
acknowledge
て
the
い
fact
ないという
that
ことが
the
一
system was
つ実現
dysfunctional
にな
at
る
this
と
point
し
in
て、
time,
非常に
they are
と
not
て
able
も
to
残念
even
なこ
come
と
to
なんです
grips
け
with
れど
that.
も、
And if you
そういう
were
ことというの
directly a
と
victim of that, I
いじ
think
め
that
の
is
問
hard to
題だった
bear.
り、あるいは
But
児童
if you
虐
think
待の問
about
題だったり、それ
bullying,
に似たような仕組みのような気がして、そういったようなこう誰が正しくて誰が
or
正しく
child
ないのか
negligence
他人に
issues,
ジャッジするの
it's
では
not
なくて、
about trying
じ
to
ゃあこれ
find
はどうしたら
the
いいのかという
culprit
方向性での議
or
論という
trying
も
to
のを進め
find
ていくことができたら、
someone to
これか
blame.
ら先10年、
Rather,
20年、先10年
if we
続
could
いてい
find a
くわけですか
constructive
ら、
direction for the
大体のそうい
discussions,
うところに一
because
つ
we
の
need to
物
look
事
to the
の中
next
で
10,
選ばれ
20
たものが
years,
どれかこれから検証していかれるんだと思いま
I
す
think
し、
that
何か
Dr.
推
Akiyama
進
is
してい
going
く
to
ため
look
には
at
何が必要なの
what
か
kind
と
of
いうことを
positive
これから
benefits
試
could be
してい
reaped
くわけ
from
だと
his
思います。
program, and I would like to also think about a way for us to look at things positively. So I see Tanioka-san and Sato-san raising their hands.
本当に建設的な議論が必要なんだと思います。
I truly believe
そ
that a
のために
constructive
もや
discussion
は
is
り
necessary.
私は知る権利というものがその
And
徹底し
in
て
order
守
for
られ
that
ないと、
to
その情報
happen,
の
I
資
think
料が
that
み
our
んな
right
情報
to
が出て
know
こない限
has to
り、
be
きちんとした議論
protected.
ができ
All
な
of the
い。その
information
資料が
has
出てこ
to
ないということが今の大きな問題
be
だと
put on
いう
the
ふうに見てい
table.
ると思い
And
ます。
I think the
それ
big
から
problem
2
right
点
now
目
is that
は、
we are
なん
not
かその心配しすぎ
seeing
たらい
that
けない。どっちがじゃあ
information.
心配するのが正しいのかみたいなことは、私なんかそんなわけないだろうと思っちゃうんですけど
And
も、その心配しすぎてはいけないよとか、心配なものは
I
心
don't think that
配し
it's
ようと
wrong
思
to
って
not
心配して
worry
るんで
too
はない
much,
という、この現実に対して。
because
でも
realistically,
本当に
people
なん
are
かこう
not
地味な
worrying
こ
just
と
because
に
they think
な
they
ってし
have
ま
to
っている
worry.
という構
That
造っていうのがあります。
structurally,
や
I
りたい
believe,
ことを
may
取
be
り除
to
かれて
blame for
いかないと
secondary
心配
damage.
し続けるというのは当たり前の
Because if the cause isn't being removed, then obviously you will continue to worry.
その原因を取り除くための努力、そし
So
てその措置というものがどれだけ進んでいるかという
we see that efforts are being made to provide more information, but what about in terms of removing the cause? That's why there seems to be no solution in sight. I believe that that is actually aggravating the stress and the psychological worries. So it wouldn't work to just treat the symptoms or to treat the pain, because I think that happens in medicine, in medical practice, but even in that case, the key in the treatment is to try to remove the cause, the underlying cause, as much as possible. And the problem that we have right now is what we need to tackle. So how do we tackle that? How do we find a road forward? And I truly believe that there's definitely a need to discuss in that direction. Sato-san?
私、今回こういう会にですね、初めて参加させていただきま
This
し
is
た。
actually the first time for me to take part in this type of gathering. In the past, I would access the internet trying to find information that would help me protect my children, so I was developing relationships for people. But when I found out about the conference, I felt that there would be many well-known experts, and I felt that it would be very constructive. It's not just about Fukushima, because goods are being distributed all over the country, and there is the issue of internal radiation. There's no such thing as zero damage from radiation unless there's zero radiation. So I worry about myself, my family. I want to make sure that my children are kept completely away from it. So the fact that this amazing conference is being held and that this discussion is being held. So I came with high expectations, thinking that this would one day be reflected in the government's policies. And now that I'm here, I'm finding out that there is so much information. There's a lot of information and there's a lot of discussion, but the people who were actually affected, the ones who were affected by the explosion, the ones who are being exposed to low-dose radiation, I feel like even that we're being told is safe. So I feel like we're not even able to speak up. I feel like I'm being told that, it's safe. It's not like I've done a lot of studying on my own, but I came here hoping that I could learn more, but it all sounds like everything is more about tabletop theory. Because what you are talking about here, I don't know how much people outside of Fukushima know about your discussions, how much of these discussions are being reflected in their lives. So I come here today, and yet I feel like this is taking place in a different world. It doesn't feel like it's about our lives that are directly in front of us. It doesn't feel personal. I don't think that anybody wanted the radiation. So the fact that we have been exposed to it means that we are victims. So the extent may differ, but there's damage, and we would like to ask for protective measures to be taken, understanding the damage, so that the real and most practical, realistic things are being taken into account. But for some reason, on television spots, we hear about how things are safe or how we should be reassured because certain measures have been taken. So I find it difficult to rid myself of the fear that things are not okay, because we are all living beings. We are not guinea pigs, and we're not about calculations. I think that we would want to give priority to the living. to humans, to animals. All of us have to be alive in order to have a living. We can't live just based on numbers. Everybody wants to protect their loved ones, families, and friends. It's not just a problem that mothers have. So instead of just looking at the level of damage or the numbers, I think the first thing to do is to look at how to reduce it to zero and come up with mitigating measures. And then once you get to zero, then if you could provide psychological support, that will allow everyone to recover a decent way of life. I think that this may sound juvenile, but that's my view. Well, a lot of money or budget has gone towards psychological support. That is what the government is aiming to do. So community nurses or clinical psychiatrists are working on that. But based on today's discussion, that may be a little bit naive of them. If there is any concern of anxiety, then how, instead of focusing on how to remove that anxiety, perhaps there is a lack of understanding as to where that anxiety is stemming from. I think that's the question being propositioned today. So clinical psychiatrists, psychotherapists, and community nurses, I have a feeling that maybe they are not being given this kind of training. This is what I felt when I attended the February seminar that Akiyama-san was at. Regardless of how this challenging situation came about, if there is an issue that needs to be addressed, then from a typical medical approach, you just need to address it. But if there is structurally a major issue, then, as we heard in today's discussion, the trust has been undermined and the real truth is not being communicated. Maybe it's structural, maybe it's a social issue that has emerged. The people who have been affected, the victims, I think they're telling us that that part is missing in our debate. I heard from some that this debate was difficult to follow, but since I was involved in planning this discussion, I want to say that this is an issue that will linger for a long time because it's not just about treating the symptoms in the short term. We're spending money. As we heard from Kitagawa-san, there may be a curative effect in these small groups. We hear that from some people on the front line. I expect this to become a long-term issue. And the forum at Fukushima Medical University in February was the day when there was heavy snowfall. So I think that there was maybe only about 10 people, and they were all snowed in. So on their way home, they actually had to dig their cars out of the snow, and it was really difficult. And I have not heard that there has been another similar discussion that has taken place since. But for me, because I think that this is very important, I asked Dr. Akiyama to come here because I think that that was a great way to make him understand that this debate exists. If we could ask you for some final words on your thoughts and if there are any answers you think you need to give.
Well, I don't think there was any specific question to me in the latter part of this discussion. the epidemiology of the radiation, and this is something that I learned from other presenters. And also, more than anything, it was a really valuable opportunity for me to hear the direct voices of people who are the victims. Tanaka-san said that maybe we're not really talking about the same thing. Well, I am a psychiatrist, and I am in a program. I am in a program to support life. And so, in a way, this is program perhaps of the importance of 0.5% of the entire efforts that you are undertaking. We talked about fundamental issues in this discussion as well, with the government, the prefectural government. Well, what they are doing, and I'm not in a position to comment about what they are doing. I don't have that expertise. Anyway, what we are doing is we are undertaking programs for people who are living in Fukushima, and we are providing a very a surface type of or a program, perhaps. And on a trial error basis, we are really struggling to find out the right answer as we create this program. And I have no idea what kind of impact this program will have in a long run. Well, I keep using first person, but well, we are all doing it with several people. But that's what the activity that I wanted to report to you about. And Iwata-san and Keith, perhaps I'd like to ask you for a comment, final comments. Well, psychological care or mental health care. What is really important here is to be acknowledged. And it has to do with children as well. We have Mrs. Tanioka, who actually created this act on protection and support for the victims. But it has to do with evacuation, migration, and return, and life. And so all these aspects of rights are guaranteed in this act. And the reason why this law was created was because of the stress, the anxiety, the fear, and the lack of knowledge of the measures of what should be taken. But there were secondary stigma and harassment on the people who had concerns. But you said, Tanioka-san, that it's the government's responsibility to provide the proof that there is no causality between radiation and health. By guaranteeing psychological stress, it could lead to palliative effect. Of course, that's not the only reason for this act, but it was one opportunity to provide some palliative effect. Maybe there is still opportunity in front of us, but within the act, the geographical target of the support was very much limited. The contamination situation was not determined, but 1 millisievert per annum was the threshold in a way above which support and rights should be given. Residents are causing stress to each other currently, and it needs to be that situation need to be mediated. And in a way, there are various excellent elements of the act, and unfortunately, this act is not really functioning properly. Some people do not have the options not to move away. They remain in Fukushima without option, and if they have no choice but to move away, then they need to live without fear. Of course, it's not easy to take decision and choose an option, but when there is a study session in Koriyama, well, oftentimes there is an issue of money. It's a simple issue. If they are willing to move away once they can sell their house, they have mortgages. If they can rent their house and solve the mortgage issue, they want to evacuate. Well, maybe a legal system must be in place to enable such option and protect the right of individuals. That would help relieve some stress from individuals and to move forward. On the contrary, for people who have no options, to tell them that there is no risk, there is no danger, it is your feeling of anxiety and fear that is causing the illness. That kind of risk communication, well, we have to think about who's actually giving the stress. It's the nuclear power plant and its accident in a primary sense. But then we also have the experts, the governments, the authority who's also causing the stress. That's my understanding. Next year, the Ministry of Environment has requested the next year's budget. They have requested special budget for a project for radiation measurements, etc. And they have requested about 12 trillion yen. 12 trillion yen worth of budget for next year's activity regarding radiation measurements, etc. It's very high, and I'm wondering if there is other better use of money. I'm sure there are other budgets allocated, but I wonder if there are better or other way of using this money. Mr. Beverstock, case.
Thank you. I can understand that.
すいません、ごめんなさい。一つ最後にいいですか。で、この環境省の概算要求で
Regarding this budget from the request from the Ministry of Environment, the name, the title of the project that they are requesting money for is the following. So, sense of security risk communication project. That's the title, by the way, of the project for Ministry of Environment.
Yes, I can understand that those people who are dealing with the situation that has arisen since March 2011 may find the debate here today to be a little bit theoretical. But we should remember that we are also thinking about not repeating this situation in the future. And the potential for further accidents occurs. And indeed, the present accident is not yet resolved completely, but the potential for further accidents is still there. And really, we must learn. And Sebastian said he didn't feel that we'd learned anything from the Chernobyl accident. Well, I think we did learn it, and then it appears that it's been forgotten. So we mustn't let that happen again. We have to be guided by the best science. And this issue of whether there is a notional threshold, a real threshold, or some kind of change at 100 millisieverts is scientific nonsense. And it should not be part of any official response to this accident. And it is driving the psychosocial effect because people realize that they are not being told the truth. And that truth cannot be concealed because it's there. There are people, of course, who don't agree, but that's the case for every scientific achievement that we get, understanding that we get. There are always some people who don't agree with it. But I have attended maybe 4 workshops designed to debate the issue of LNT, whether there is a linear dose response. And those debates have had both sides represented, those who believe that LNT is established through empirical evidence, and those who think that they can find a way around that evidence to say that it's not true. And in every single one of those 4 meetings, the conclusion has been that LNT is our best understanding of the dose response for ionizing radiation and human health. That's very clear. And just because somebody can make some kind of argument on the basis of one experiment, it doesn't invalidate that general finding. And the other point that I wanted to make very clearly is that in spite of this heading, psychosocial effect, which seems to indicate that it might be confined to psychology, it isn't. The psychosocial effect is the actual pathological illness which results from the prolonged fear and stress or worry or whatever you like to call it. So I think if people are told what the situation is and they're told what can be done about it, and even if not a great deal can be done about it and some risk is going to be entailed, I think people's response is, okay, we have to deal with it. There is going to be a cost. It's unavoidable, but I feel I understand it. I'm in control of my own life, and I trust the authorities who tell me this. They don't trust the authorities once they haven't told the truth. And that is the unfortunate thing about this particular situation, is that some of my colleagues here in Japan, who I've worked with in the past, are taking this line that you can neglect the risks below 100 millisievert. I think that's very sad, because I think they know that's not true.
はい、どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was a very difficult and complex debate. But I hope and I feel the need to continue this kind of discussion. Some people might feel that we already have the answer and the conclusion, but there are others who don't share this view, and there is a great amount of budget that is injected. Psychological, mental support. Well, we can expect in a long time in the future, into the future, various symptoms that will arise that has to do with healthcare, mental health care, sorry. And maybe it's my own personal view only, but yeah, it's also true that we had various questions that were raised. And I believe that very important points were raised during the second roundtable. I would like to conclude the second roundtable. Saito-san, please. We will take 25 minutes break, and we will resume 3:45, the roundtable 3.